अरे यार आप बताइए आप।
अरे आप जो
आपके
बोलोगे वो दिखाता हूँ।
आपके पास तो जादू की छड़ी है, आप जो भी बताएंगे सब लोग खुश हो जाएंगे। नॉट टू वरी। जस्ट गो एज यू आर, सो
So can we start with the video so that yeah, we'll start with the video.
Marathwada Mitramandal's College of Architecture is located in the heart of Pune city. Founded by President late Mr. Shankarav G. Chavan and affectionately raised by the late Mr. Vilasrao G. Deshmukh. The MMM group is led by noble trustees and guided by highly qualified and experienced faculty members. The campus has ample parking space, sophisticated infrastructure which includes ICT-enabled classrooms, studios, seminar halls, conference room, computer lab with state-of-art software and facilities for the physically challenged people.
Well-maintained and updated library which is well equipped with textbooks, reference book.
Our alumni is placed worldwide and many students settled abroad.
Elections for Students' Council is conducted every year using online voting system.
Good afternoon and welcome all the attendees and panelists to day 5 of the webinar series 8 days, 8 architects, 8 cities. I, architect Tanay Ambavane, on behalf of Marathwada Mitra Mandal College of Architecture, Pune, would like to welcome our panelist, Dr. Supriya Nene, Principal at MMCUL, Architect Girish Doshi, Design Chair at MMCUL, and our speaker for today, Architect Samip Padora from Mumbai, India. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. I will take this opportunity to introduce our speaker for today. Architect Samip Padora is a practicing architect and a principal of design studio SP+A in Mumbai. He received his diploma in architecture from Academy of Architecture, Mumbai, and went on to study at SkyArc in Los Angeles and pursued his master's from the Graduate School of Design, Harvard University in 2005. As a practice, SP+A believes that India's vast breadth of socio-cultural environments require diverse means of engaging with the country's varying contexts. Type, program, design, and building processes are subservient to the nearness of each project's unique frame of reference. SP+A has been named as one of the top 21 emerging practices in the world by WAN21 in 2014. SP+A also has an active research arm that fuels its practice on the ground. Welcome, sir. I request Samip sir to kindly start with his presentation.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me here. If you see me looking in two directions, it's not because I'm distracted, but really because I have two screens that are almost 90 degrees to each other, so I'm constantly kind of toggling between them. But yeah, so I'm going to. I've actually been thinking about what to present. One is, of course, some of the work that we've done in the past has been fairly well documented and published, but also because after a certain amount of time, you know, one also gets bored of showing the same work again and again. So it's also for myself that I'm kind of interested in relooking at some of the work. And also, you know, what happens is with sometimes lectures like this give one the opportunity to also look back at your own work and to see if there are some kind of commonalities, some kind of interests that seem to emerge from the body of work that you have done or you are doing. And that being said, of course, you know, when Girish sir kind of invited, I can't say no to him. I had to say yes, and I'm here. And so let me just begin with a few slides. But I'm really kind of looking forward to having a conversation with Girish sir at the end of the presentation. So I'll try and keep it, you know, a little short and not talk too much. But yeah, here goes. Let me. Yeah, can you see my screen?
Not yet. Yeah, we can see your screen, sir.
Yeah, can you see it?
Yes.
So yeah, you know, the thing is, I also wanted to when I've spoken in the past, I've talked about certain interests that have emerged as a practice for us, but also you know, when talks about this in hindsight, and it's always you know, to the benefit of your 2020 vision, right? So you're kind of looking at this, you're looking back at this, and you're able to make these judgments. But many times, when you're in that particular point of time and working on a particular project, you might not have the same amount of clarity. But what I'm going to do is take this opportunity of setting up projects. Some of them are built, but a majority will be work in progress. Projects that I haven't shown publicly as yet. Projects that will be at various points of resolution. So yeah, I'm not going to be running through projects in depth. I'm happy to go back and talk about any one project, any of the other build projects if there is a kind of need to do that. But just to give you just a disclaimer right at the beginning, this is not a kind of in-depth view of any one particular project. It's going to be, you know, something that's wider and talking more about the scope in some sense of what we've been working on. So, you know, this is actually the first image that I'm starting off with is of our studio in Mumbai, and you can actually see various kind of activities that happen in the studio. characteristics of people who work in the studio. This is a drawing made by Sanjana when she was actually leaving to go to work with someone else. And this is her kind of goodbye gift. But it's for me capturing the essence of what the studio is. It's really this kind of miniature set of spaces to kind of. It's not. There is no authorship. There's no single authorship. I'm not the one. Again, another disclaimer. I'm not the one sitting at a desk making drawings of what the final project is going to be. It's really a kind of group effort. Vami, Aparna, I mean, everyone, Sudarshan, Jem involved in making what they are. The has emerged back in hindsight is we've been doing can broadly be categorized into four kinds of projects. One is, of course, a traditional model of practice, where a client comes to you and gives you a project, and you begin a project. And of course, we've got an entire portfolio of work that's exactly those kind of projects. There is also collaborative work. I mean, we've ended up doing a lot of our work with people who know more about a particular site, a particular material than we do. And what we've ended up doing in conditions like this is that looking to kind of attribute these projects together, not just say that this is the way that I want the project to be, but it's really something that comes out of in some exploring common ground. The third is the collective, and this is our work that we've been doing with 6 other architects here in Bandra called the Bandra Collective, where we look at design of public spaces for the BMC. This is largely a pro bono exercise, but we managed to do some amount of work. And the last real kind of category is research, and where we've actually actively looked at sourcing data, analyzing data, and looking at what the data actually shows us as future directions for work, for projects. I mean, this isn't specific to only our housing work. I mean, I'm sure all of you might have at some point seen the housing book that we produced 4 years ago. But it's also about the fact that research is an integral part of each project that we undertake, whether it's material research, whether it's about typology, whether it's about skills, and so on and so forth. So so while I've also, again, like I said earlier, this is of course me going back and looking at all of our work in retrospect and being able to sieve out, in some sense, these 4 broad categories through which we can frame our work. And also these 4 broad categories are not to be seen in isolation. They are also constantly informing each other, and they are in some sense symbiotic. So that being said, let me just kind of quickly recap some of the stuff that you might remember from the work that we've done, pre-lockdown, and some of the work that's continuing now. Where this is of course our project Jetwan, where we were actually looking at a building in a grove of trees, where we were trying to connect to the greenery while we were still inside the building, where the entire production of that project is really an essay on how to be able to leverage the materials that we find locally, but not in the way that you past or done at all with them. Really create almost ecology check that is off the place, using materials from the place, but yet looking in, I hope towards the future. This is a project we worked on with Hunarshala to build these walls of rammed stone dust with recycled wood structure, as well as the insulation that we got from these mud rolls that we put in. Again, this is the kind of premise that we started off with. How do you actually connect with the foliage around you while you sit inside the space? The second project is from this recap bit is the library that we built out of in some sense, while the first project was about a material ecology, here it's really about a knowledge network, where we argue through this project that while we are sitting in India working in a project in in Maharashtra, working with materials that are available to us here, we are learning from like a tile vaulting technique from 16th century Spain, details from Dieste's work in Uruguay, using Rhino Volt that comes out of Switzerland to actually build a project in India. So this for us is also a means to relook at the role of the regional, both in terms of its components and in terms of the product. How do you look at releasing the regional from that the locked geographical image that you have of the regional, and how can the regional itself become richer through these kind of global knowledge networks? These are, of course, images. Of course, I mean, these projects are all online, and it's easy for to kind of look at more details on these. But yeah, these are just a few images that I'm sharing of these two projects. A third project, which was this factory that we call the Concrete Void. It's really a very simple project, which in our terms is about a project that you typically do, in between the city and nature. In this case, what you actually see is our project is situated on a site that was low-lying, at least a part of the site was low-lying, and we had water kind of overflow surrounding pond that actually overflowed during the monsoons. And what we did was, rather than fill up that low-lying area, we transformed that into a space for people to congregate when there was water, which just kind of became a receptacle to take that runoff. And these are just images of that. Again, I won't get into too much detail. That's the actual area. We've also been doing a fair amount of thinking on this idea of practice and what it really means in the kind of larger annals of the work that's being produced in the country. So in 2019, we were actually invited by the curators of the Seoul Biennale to present our work there, but also to do a small India section, curate a small India section, where we actually, of course, showed our own housing research, but also curated this entire section of ways of collective practice that are now emerging in our country, where the traditional model of the architect, the single architect or the single practice as the author is being challenged, not just because of the increase of scope, but also in terms of the projective capacity of that kind of project, the agencies that you have access to create change that is far-reaching, or that is more than being limited to just a kind of formal or a spatial agenda. So really, we actually put together these 10 practices and looked at their projects in detail. Again, this data is available online. You can, for whoever really wants to kind of look at it in detail. We were talking about practices like Neera and Arvind's practice as practices of resistance, the work that Shweta and Hussain are doing through the Collective for Spatial Alternatives, P.K. Das and Associates, the celebratory projects that Abhin's been doing, working with community, creating these beautiful pandals in for Durga Puja in Calcutta, Bus Ride and their incredible work, Start, the Street Art Festival, and the way that they go into these derelict parts of the city and completely invigorate them with the kind of interventions that they do in Chennai, in Mumbai, in Delhi, so on and so forth. And of course, our own work as a Bandra Collective within Mumbai, and to kind of look at the interventions that we are doing in public space, Architecture Ed in Chennai, and also the work of people like Rohan and Mukul, who are these incredible architect. I mean, Rohan's an architect, Mukul is a filmmaker, but these incredible films that they are making that talk about, in some sense, the collective memory of architecture and its capacity, its failures, and their ability to kind of look at kind of architectural atmosphere of a particular time through film. Also, the work of Riaz Tayabji from Antle Design in Ahmedabad, and his thinking about Gandhi and the architecture of Mahatma Gandhi. And yeah, so this was actually the entire kind of display of these contextual practice, these new modes of practice at Seoul. This is the stuff that we've been working on, which is part of our second book, where we are looking actively at the DCR and the development plan to look at the kind of fabric that it creates within a city like Mumbai. and sometimes very oppressive fabric. I have a TED talk that I've done on this, but what we are trying to do is really dissect the bylaws to actually talk about what kind of bylaw creates what kind of specific architectural fabric. And once we are being able to do this, what we wish to do next is to then create a new set of bylaws that are qualitatively informed, that use the same semantic that the current bylaw has, but is a lot more sensitive to conditions of livability through light, ventilation, etc. So this is just some ongoing research. And of course, the Bandra Collective Project, during the lockdown, we've actually been extremely active. Some of the work that we've been doing on Carter Road, on the Carter Road Promenade with, skate park and so on and so forth is being built. We also got together to quickly put out manuals of what do you do post lockdown once a lot of our market streets open. So there were various kind of interventions that we recommended. Some of these got built in parts of the city. So this is really a kind of recap, both of the period that before the lockdown, and also a little bit of the stuff that we've been doing since the lockdown started. I'm just going to now show you a few projects that this is the only, I think this and the next one are the only ones that are actually finished. The other ones after this are all in process. It's really talking about what we got done before the lockdown. This is a temple that we've done in outside of Hyderabad, about 5 hours from Hyderabad, where it's a Balaji temple. And this idea for the temple really was something that one had toyed with for about 6-7 years. There was a project where we were invited to actually design a temple on a site in Rajasthan where there was a water body existing, or they were actually making a kind of surrounding water body. And we had thought about the temple being right at the edge of the water body, and how the idea of the steps of the water body to the water could actually become a part of the temple architecture. So it's really an idea that we had a really long time ago. This is actually a model from the original project. And when we were asked to look at this new site that we were building at, which had a very similar outlay, areas which were because of the dewatering from the stone quarries, limestone quarries close by, that JSW was using to produce cement. We actually went back to that idea of how do you actually look at creating an architecture that is simultaneously landscape. And I think that also shows up as an interest, many times through our work. The other interest the other thing I'm really interested in is the idea of representation. And I think the Indian miniature, and of course Doshi's done that. In fact, this on the idea of representation, I actually have a separate lecture which I was toying with doing today instead of doing the lecture that I'm finally doing, but maybe another time. But the idea of the miniature is something that is hugely kind of interesting for us, where we are able to show both space and time simultaneously, where you're not limited to a space in a particular time, but you're also being able to flatten through the flattened perspective, be able to also create simultaneous moments through the day or through the month or through the year. So this is really a kind of drawing of the temple. I'm just going to run you through some plans. I mean, I can of course explain a bit where you actually kind of come in from this left side. This is the Varaha Swami shrine, where you actually come in, pay homage before you go in. This is the Pushkarni pond, where the idols of the two temples are kind of cleansed. This Pushkarni shrine, this Pushkarni pond extends as a water body, as in the low-lying area, where it actually takes a lot of the water that comes off from those mines and is actually kind of stored here to allow to replenish the water table that is depleting fast. So it's really it becomes a kind of ecological exercise as well for us. What you see as you come in on the top here is really where the Agni Kund is. Behind which is the priest's quarters, and next to it there is a kitchen. This here is the Deep Stambh, or the victory pillar. Actually, it's not the Deep Stambh; it's a victory pillar. And then you come into the main shrine, which is right here. So it's really, in some sense, a very simple idea when you think about it. It's a singular, architectural device that creates the form of the temple. And while the kind of singularity of the project, the singularity of the element is for in my mind not limiting. It what it does is creates a voucher for series of ecological events to take place, the collection of the water, the replenishing of the water table, all weaved into the narrative of the temple itself. So it becomes a means to a certain extent to be able to do more than what a traditional temple was supposed to do. I think, broadly, this is another thing that's really kind of been well, let's say a kind of preoccupation where I'm more and more interested in this idea of reducing form to kind of very basic properties and to look at layers that might add to the performance of that particular building type or that particular form. So the reduction of form and for simplistically speaking, an increase in performance. That's really where it's at. And of course, there are some pictures of it. You can also see making these steps, this gradual enough so people can sit on them, and then making it steeper where exactly the kind of garbhagriha is. It also comes in some sense to of course buffer the heat that you would actually have. So the grass actually buffers some of that, but also to talk about what really is sacred, what is profane. When you actually have a shikhara that which through steps merges into steps of the ghat and into the water, where do you actually make the boundary? And I think for me, it's also in some sense a kind of orientation for myself, and what my kind of interests are, both in terms of religion as well as in terms of a philosophical position. So these are just some more images of that, and you can see the kind of low-lying area we're set in. Some of these are fields, but a large number of that is all the water that you actually see is a kind of runoff. You can see the JSW plant in the distance. Yeah, that gives you a kind of fair idea of what that entire structure is. And of course, then when people are kind of using the space, it really becomes extremely kind of activated visually. Yeah, there is a tiny little kind of copper line that runs in this, which orients you from the entry to the center of the deity, but I'm not sure if it's very clear in the image. But this is really actually one of my favorite images. This is another one that will come in, where you can see this relationship between the water about this project. He spoke about how are really a kind of negative until he kind of brought that up. But it's interesting. It's interesting to kind of think about it through that perspective as well. Just some more images of the temple. And again, this is another project temple that an image that I really like. It also, I mean, this is of course a kind of personal kind of memory that I have of having grown up in Kashmir in this area called Rainawari, where my mother's house used to be. We used to have a small temple there called Vital Sahib, which was dedicated to Shiva, but it was also a temple that was by the stream. It was on the banks. It had steps that led from the temple down into the water, and it's so that that I have that I have very very faintly, but it was a strong kind of memory that I've carried forward. But no, I have to also confess that it wasn't at the top of my mind when I actually worked on this project. It's something that seems to have come to the fore the more I've looked at this project and kind of realized maybe that there was some kind of subconscious connect to that. And of course, this is the kind of visual of the inside of the temple. It's built out of limestone blocks that are corbelled to create a skylight on top, which brings natural light onto the deity. But so the project, of course, was a lot of people said that they liked the project, and we heard a lot of good things about it. But I think one also has to kind of acknowledge the fact that this is in some sense, well, every architectural project is a political project, but temple architecture, given the time that we live in, is more kind of more than that. So more than the others maybe. And what happened after this kind of image was published at a lot of places online, there was one particular troll that kept sending us messages talking about how the project wasn't it's not anything that we were talking about it, that it's very non-Indian, and how and you can transport designs from abroad for local consumption and so on and so forth. So it was, and these are just two images that I could actually share, two messages that I could share. Same person kept doing it again and again. So we kind of went forward and looked at who it was. It was an Instagram account that had 0 followers, was following 0 people. So I think there is this understanding the fact that all architecture is political, and I think the more I kind of talk about the projects as we go forward, I'm going to try and maybe dwell on that a little bit, and maybe we can talk about it as well. So the second project I'm showing is what is called the House of Multiple Courts. It's built in Goa. It's a house that is the interiors are done by Tarun Telyani. That's a separate conversation. But what we did was really look at the context that we were building in, where the entire there was a kind of view of the fields and the water beyond in a river beyond those fields. So what we were trying to do was trying to keep the house as compact as is possible. It's load bearing. It's basically a load bearing laterite set of walls, where the entire profile of the house really gets punctuated by the existing trees that we found on site, and including a small well. So we kept all of that intact, and then basically just built the house around it. These are, of course, some more drawings of the house. That's the kind of model. That's the house, and that's the way you actually see it. The corner is corbelled because it's allowing for a car to turn at that point. So we didn't bring the house completely down at one of the corners. We corbelled it, and this is what you see when you actually approach it from the road. It's kind of laterite balcony on the right hand side. Just some more images of the house as you kind of progress through it, and this is towards the view of the house. Deep and goes up completely towards you. So it's just a series. It's just kind of rhythmic that follow the program inside, and again on the inside you have this kind of these various cutouts of courtyards that allow you to create this kind of connection with the landscape that is quite strong. Yeah, just some more images of that. It's actually an interesting spatial experience, which is very difficult to capture in an image because of the overlaid nature of the courtyards, and the way that you visually connect from one courtyard to another through a window of a third courtyard, and so on and so forth. So this is actually the kind of so it's a form finish concrete on the roof, and laterite load-bearing laterite block. There are windows that allow you to look back into the approach road. This is what I was talking about, that there are courtyards scattered all over the place, and you're visually being looking from one part to the other. Yeah, this is another courtyard. So even in the bedrooms, what we've actually got is cutaways for trees to grow through. So while you're in the bedroom, you're able to kind of also see a courtyard that has a tree growing through, and it's the connection with the landscape is consistent while you don't actually lose any privacy as well. So just various manifestations of how screens were done and so on and so forth, details of skirting and that corbel that I mentioned front up. This is a project that I would like to say that we have finished, but it is finished more by the client than us. But it had some, it's again a 9-year-old project, which went on hold. And when we came back to the project, one day when we kind of checked back, the client had built it from whatever drawings that he had, which was both sad and a huge learning. So so it's built in Badlapur. It's by a stream of water. What we were trying to do is orient the new blocks that the client wanted, such that there were streets, internal streets between each of these blocks that led you to the water, which to the waterfront. This is really a kind of overall master plan that we had done for the site, and this is the first phase that's built. You can see the water here at this end, the first street and the classroom street and visuals. We're trying to do but ridiculously, I mean, at 100 so what you actually see is that a lot of the fins that are for shading also are fins that turn into columns and become structure. So what we were trying to do constantly was to try and see for of so and difficult to tell, which is what which is a column, which is just a fin. So it's interesting in the way that it turned out. It was it's kind of done reasonably well. This is the gym block. It was oriented such that you actually had north light coming into each of these into the rooms. So it's just again a series of kind of not we have heard. Yeah, this is what the client built. So it's basically so this was the project that was done. And again, these are projects that I've shown before there, except maybe my Instagram feed. This is a project that in some sense, I mean, it's basically a cafeteria kind of addition to a building that we had done for a college in Bombay. What you actually see here is the fact that it was meant to be a pavilion. The kitchen was inside. What we were merely doing was like a kind of dining pavilion. It had a lot of trees, so we were kind of interested in making the pavilion since the shadow of the tree on the roof. So we use this multi-wall polycarbonate where the entire project is really about just the single detail. And really, again, it's on a side note, when I was in college, and I would kind of look at the work of Mies, I would think, oh, what's great about this, right? I mean, it's nice, but what's interesting? But it's not. I think it was much later that one starts kind of conceptually, while one might understand what Mies' work is really about, its sense is something that that I think you kind of prescribe to only after having done a little bit of work, and also understanding a certain need for clarity and reduction in what comprises a project. So really, for me, this is the project. It's that column that stands in the landscape. It's a bracket from that column that supports the built-in seat, light that's built into the column, the polycarbonate that's suspended off a structural system that lies above it, again, using the column as a major structuring device. So it's really this single detail that creates the project. The lines, the height, see that is cafeteria. Again, this kind of pavilion in the landscape. And you can see the kind of idea of lightness and how evident it is within this this structure. It's very rare for me personally to be interested in lightness, but I think more than lightness, what I was kind of interested in was this idea of a singularity, of being able to reduce the project to a kind of minimum, to do more with less. Yeah, this is just to give you a sense of the project. And again, on a side note, this is not a project a lot of people like, but it's really I really enjoy kind of this project that people see and say, oh, it's okay, it's something great, but it's one of my favorite projects. So yeah, just to give you a sense of the spatial condition. One of these, now I'm showing you some work that so what I've basically shown you is what got built. This is stuff that I'm going to show now that's getting built as we speak, and I'm going to end with a section about what's probably never going to get built. Yeah. So this is actually a small project for a developer in Goa. It's a site where she wanted to do these houses, and rather than do houses on a site with boundary walls and separations, what we were trying to do was really create this kind of condition of a village. The site itself was low-lying, and as you can see, it was higher towards the edges and lower towards the center, and it collected water during the monsoon. So what we did was we actually regraded that such that the low-lying areas were towards the edges, where we also had pools for each of these houses. And the house itself come to the center where our main access to each of these buildings is from. So the site still floods, but it's only along the periphery. The other point that we were also trying to make was the fact that we also wanted greater connection with the sky and the landscape and the house form. It was important that the house form allowed us to do that. So what you see on the left is what could have happened, but what you see on the right is what we actually ended up doing, where you push all of the living programs towards the central street. So they basically all open up towards the middle, and that street basically becomes activated because of that program spilling out. These are just drawings of how we were modulating the form of the house itself. It's at multiple levels. As you can see, the living room has a kind of 1.5 times height. And then these various programs are scattered across the middle landings of and landings of staircases. So there are different heights from each other, which also creates an interesting section. And these are just some images of the model. These are images of the project under construction. It's close to finishing. I think it finishes the end of this year. Just some more visuals of how those openings towards that street are kind of modulated to make that connection even stronger. This is a project that we've finished. Well, we finished a long time ago in Hyderabad, but it's still not opened. What we were actually trying to do was trying to create shading for the building. Again, building on a very tight kind of footprint. Chhajas that needed to be spotted, support through corbelling, and that corbelling then becoming a kind of beam that ran through the entire length of the building. What you see here is an image of the various conditions of that the corbelling needed to create, certain kinds of window profiles. All that was, of course, drawn up. We worked obviously with these fantastic masons who did this incredible job of corbelling the brick just enough to be able to take the load off the chhaja. But what we were also doing while making the building, or for making the building really, was also making tools for that corbelling to happen. So the building is as much a production of what Rhino did as much as what these handmade tools were allowed. The kind of, so it is about the building. The project that is currently again under construction, almost, well, it should also finish end of this year. This is a drawing that actually talks about that. It's a project that is about 4.5, 5 years old now, where we were building in Kota. I don't know how many of you know. I mean, I'm sure everyone knows about how Kota is like it's like a center for students to come from all over the country to prepare for entrance exam for IIT. And hostels thus become a very important part of the kind of urban fabric of the city. And the project that we were being asked to do was really a set of hostel rooms with the owner living on the top 3 floors. So what we ended up doing when we actually looked at the fabric was the fact that people were building, and these are very narrow and thin plots. The people are kind of building towards the front and the back, and then there would be rooms in the middle without any natural light ventilation, which was quite terrible. So what we ended up doing was looking at the kind of grid that we needed for each of those units, and what we needed to subtract to make sure that there was enough light and ventilation, to kind of create these spaces for these kids to come out into, to meet each other, to meet other people. But also an important thing, as you can see in that orange arrow, because of the fact that this fabric is continuous and it's really kind of oppressive with no break, while at the back there is a big ground, we actually opened up on ground this kind of series of double height, triple heights that allows a passerby to be able to look through to the green that lies beyond our plot, beyond our unit. So in some sense, it is also kind of urbanistic gesture. It is not just about the program itself. These are just kind of and you can see the central courtyard. You can see how the void is actually kind of connecting all the way towards the back. It also connects from the bottom here, which you can see through this. Yeah, it's a very interesting structural challenge as well to kind of build something like this. That gives you a sense. There is a bridge that allows you to connect between the house programs at the upper level as well. These are just some images of how we were modulating these Kota balconies made out of Kota, obviously, and that's the project. So project we are working on in Lilla, that is a old fort that which was completely destroyed over a series of earthquakes in Himachal. So what we were trying to do was trying to understand its position within the landscape of where we're situated. There's these beautiful apple orchards in the front, and then the kind of a wild forest behind. So what we were trying to do was trying to build on the fact that the original fort actually had this courtyard, and try and see how we can actually structure the entire building around that around that original fort. So really, this is this kind of section through that landscape. So as you can see, it actually sits within that particular set of mountains, between that particular valley at the highest point. What you see here is just a kind of plan, and it's the kind of contours that we are sitting on. That's the original courtyard that was structured. There are rooms at the level of the courtyard now. There are public programs, and at the upper levels there are rooms. And this is just a model of the project that talks about how the entire project gets kind of built out from that original idea of keeping the courtyard as is and then building around it. This is a project. I actually should have put this towards the end, but it might actually get built. At some point. But really, what this project is about is it's a bus terminus for JSW in Vijayanagar, close to Hampi, where they have a massive factory. The reason I'm showing this project is because the idea for this project was something that we used in the ill-fated National War Museum, and how, which I've already kind of explained in some sense in the Temple of Steps as well, that ideas don't need to die, even though projects might not exist anymore. Their validity is enforced by your ability to be able to take the kind of grain of that idea and be able to plant it wherever you find the appropriate nurturing environment or soil. It's basically a corner plot. There is a railway line right next to our site. What we were doing is working on structure. We were actually building a formal evolution that allowed us to create these big halls to allow for the buses to park and other programs to actually happen. And when I show you the National War Museum project towards the end, you'll see that the language is very similar. Yeah, this is the kind of JSW bus terminal. You can see it here. Another project that we are again kind of in the process of building in Goa is a project called Zira. It's one of my favorite projects. It's also one of the sites that for me was particularly daunting, because it's in Verem, the site, which is by the water. And those of you who know the site well, these are villas that were designed by Charles Correa. So I'm sure if you kind of look at the image, you might kind of recognize it. So to design, and our site actually is at the back here. It's on a hillside. It's at the foot of the hill, kind of climbing upwards. And for me, I'm hugely kind of conscious of the fact that when we work today, we work in contiguity. That even if we are doing something that is different from what was done earlier, it is there's a break in kind of formal tradition. There is still a kind of continuity that is possible through thought. And building near Charles Corrier's buildings for me was really daunting. I mean, not that. Yeah, it's just I was just very self-conscious about it. And what we've done for this project, and the reason why it's one of my favorite projects, and I have to say that its genesis was the idea of almost in some sense enmeshing the idea of Sidade Goa with the artists village that in Belapur that Charles Corrier did, and to really look at this idea of a kind of vertical village. There are programs like the living room, the bedrooms to open directly into a shared terrace / courtyard. So it's a series of staggered courtyards that actually climbs up onto the entire hillside. I'm showing you a plan. It's like a DD level plan right now, but it's just to kind of show you how the building's working. But like I said, this is a project that I find particularly gratifying, and this is just a kind of visual of the project. I don't typically like to show renders of projects, but I thought it might be easier to kind of explain it through the visual. So this is something that is under construction. I just hope Mr. Correa is not upset when this is done finally. And this is really kind of the model that we actually started off with the elements of the balka when you kind of enter, and how you kind of progress, and then these kind of the scaled back I've first shown you projects that have been built lately. I've then shown you projects that are under construction. I'm now going to show you projects that might never be built, at least not by me. This is the National War Museum project, a competition we won in 2016. A lot of you already know the story, so I won't go into what happens after you in a competition, but really just talk about the scheme itself. I've never really presented it in any gatherings. This is really the first time that I'm doing it. What's interesting about the fact of building in this, of course, it's kind of hugely loaded. There's enough noise about the Central Vista project, so we know exactly what's happening in this precinct. But just to give you a sense, this was where our site was located. That is the central hexagon. That is India Gate. That goes on to Rashtrapati Bhavan right there. It also has, this entire stretch has a number of public programs. But if you actually look at the buildings that are located on that hexagon, they all have imposing edges. There are walls that separate, that don't open out. You see very impervious, massive monuments that sit on that hexagon. So what we were trying to examine was the possibility where we actually move the gallery spaces, which are typically just closed off programs, above ground, and to bring all of the programs that could have direct access for public, even people who don't want to visit the museum, like the cafe, like the gift shop, all of that, to actually come down on ground. What you then see is that there is the potential to create this public route, this public plaza in between these various programs that can stay open well beyond beyond working hours. And in fact, it becomes almost an extension of these fantastic public spaces, these lawns that we had along Rashtrapati Bhavan, that would then kind of also, not the lawns itself, but just the idea would then kind of extend into the building, as opposed to all of the impervious buildings that you see in the kind of in the LBZ. So this was our site. We had lots of trees on our site. What we did was we basically took the big trees, we took all of the trees actually, and made cutouts around them to see what we are left with in terms of built form, and then extruded that built form. We, of course, found that there were 28 trees to be transplanted, but that was largely because of the fire tender circulation. We were thinking about material and also form. what we did was we actually were supposed to design galleries for three, for the Army, for the Navy, for the Air Force. And rather than doing three buildings sitting separately, what we did was we actually overlaid them one on top of the other, with the Navy being at the bottom, the Army in the middle, and the Air Force at the top. We then kind of drafted this timeline of the history of the armed forces in our country, and then dependent on which armed force was commissioned or was active, we were able to create, we were able to scoop out sections where the armed force was not active. So let's say in the 1948 Indo-Pak War, there might not have been any creates the form of the building. So in some sense, the building is a manifestation of time. It's a timeline. When you walk through the building, you're not walking through distinct galleries. You're walking through the history of India's armed forces through time. So that really creates the form of our building. And this is what I mentioned earlier, that as opposed to the solid monumentality of the other buildings that were built, when South Block was built, we have now kind of a technical know-how, as well as the potential to talk about how we can look at accessibility. How do we create public space? How can we create buildings that are more public than what they were built initially as? So that's what we were trying to achieve through this porous monumentality. Of course, using materials that we found, in the history of Delhi, not necessarily at the bungalow zone or in this precinct, but in the history of Delhi. So the red sandstone was something that we were proposing, but we of course go back and change that later, and you'll see why. And so really, it's the project was a kind of summation of these two ideas: the idea of the building as a kind of timeline, and the idea of saving the trees that we had. And this is how it manifests on the hexagon. At least this was our intention. And this is how it actually sits within the setting. So it's a structure that is reinforced shear walls on the outside, and all of the areas around the tree as being this kind of steel grid structure. So these are just kind of images of the project. So like I said in the beginning, what you actually do when you enter into the building is not move horizontally through floors. What you're doing is taking ramps and moving through time. So you're actually looking at a timeline of the Indian armed forces and not just a building. I'm not going to go into details about circulation. I mean, we obviously going to thought all of that through. That's the ground floor plan. So the building touches the ground only at 11 places. And from there, we're actually doing shotcrete bolts that allow us to span these big spaces to allow for all of the trees to kind of grow. Again, circulation, I'm not going to get into. Yeah, these are some of those spaces that we had actually kind of designed. So there were gallery spaces, open air kind of exhibitions. You don't have to go into, again, the museum to actually see exhibits. We use only a partial basement for some of the artifact storage and some public parking. And you can now see at the level of, actually, maybe, did I miss that? No, so that was at the ground, that plan's at the ground. This plan is at the level of the Navy. So you can see that some of those gallery spaces are missing. The connection then happens through a ramp that takes you up, and then you connect through the Army gallery back into like that. So all of these ramps are at 1:25 slope. They're very, very gradual to walk on. And this is the Army floor that runs consistently from one edge to the side to the other. And you can see that you're constantly kind of moving in between trees and foliage and so on and so forth. The idea was really to move away from the idea of the closed off gallery as the standard, and really to start looking at how we can work with the landscape to create an art gallery that also gives you enough relief. So in this render, what you're able to see is the lower Navy gallery, the Army gallery, and then the Air Force gallery on top. Yeah, this is some more plan. And then the roof is actually made into this public amphitheater, which allows you, again, views out into the landscape, which you typically cannot get from any other building of the neighborhood. So really, what we were trying to look at is creating this really public architecture that we were hoping would challenge the way that typical government buildings have been looked at in the past. Again, like you can see the section modulates because of this idea of the building as timeline to create double height, triple height spaces. Yeah, that's the entire length of the building. I'm sorry if my screens are not being seen completely, but you can see how many kind of stop spaces there are, pause spaces there are because of the trees on site. Just some more visuals. Of course, we kind of worked with Bureau Happold on structure, on sustainability, to actually look at how we'd be able to do all of this. There were big panels that would open in to bring big artifacts whenever there was a need to do that. Services were embedded. Just some more visuals of the space, breakout areas that you could come to, because it's actually a 1.8-kilometer long walk to go from one gallery from the start of the museum to the other. So in case people want to get out for a bit, there were spaces that were designed to be for that. And also the bridge that finally takes you to the amphitheater on the roof. This is just an image of the model. It's the only one that I could find because it still is with the Ministry of Defense, who haven't returned it to us. And this was what the final project was. We, however, of our own volition, once we found out that there were forces at play to kind of prevent us from getting the project, including some kind of comments by the DOAC, where we then started looking at a change in materiality to kind of appease them. This is of course without them having called us, but we kept sending them these images saying that we could still work with language. It's not the idea of a material is one, but of course the essence of the building is really its kind of spatial construct. But yeah, it was something that we worked on. I think this is really the last project. I don't know how long I've gone on for. Yeah, 52 minutes. Okay, I'm just going to take about 7-8 minutes more and finish up with this last project, which is the Maharashtra Nature Park. It's again a competition that we had won in 2017, international competition for a nature park in Mumbai. It's called the Mahim Nature Park at that point, but it's really a kind of reclaimed landfill which is a garbage dump where they actually used to dump garbage that they'd collect. And there was some planting done on top of it, which then became a forest, or it was supposed to be a forest. And it sits right at the banks of the kind of Mithi River. I'm sure some of you remember the Mithi River from 2005, 2006, when it flooded. It's then and suddenly the city realized that we actually had a river sitting. But this is this is our site. This is Dharavi. So you're really sitting at the cusp of two dramatically different user groups, and the edge of the river is what you see it to be. So we were very clear that there was no way that people were going to come to Mahi Nature Park if this issue was not kind of addressed. And so the competition brief was about looking at the nature park itself, creating a pedestrian bridge from BKC, so you could park your car at BKC and walk across, and to also create a new architecture for because the existing building was in bad condition, was showing cracks and so on and so forth because of settlement, subsoil settlement. So what we were constantly kind of thinking about is how do you tie this up as a catalyst? How do you tie up the park as a catalyst to also talk about the larger region? So what we were saying is that there were a number of slums that were actually going into redevelopment that were along the edge. There were also a fair amount of open spaces and green spaces that existed along the stretch. So the potential really was for us to kind of realize how we could readdress this. And of course, like I mentioned, 2005, 2006, we remember what happened when the Mithi flooded. It was complete chaos, because what has happened was a lot of the development of BKC and a lot of the kind of settlements on Dharavi are on the littoral area of Mithi. These were its flood banks, which have been built on, and which is why there is this potential of flooding. And we've seen this happen before, and already because of the kind of reclamation work that's happening on Coastal Road, we are seeing this happen again. And it sometimes becomes, and here's where the kind of political question is extremely important, to realize that all projects we do have, in some sense, to also address the political cycle, where while our projects might, or our kind of attempts to design a project might be 20, 30, 40 years, thinking 20, 40, 50, 60, 100 years down the line, the political economy of a politician's kind of cycle is 5 years, right? So I don't know how, you probably all heard this before. I think it was the Prime Minister or the President of Luxembourg who talked about, whenever we are doing development, we know how to do the right thing, but we don't know how to get elected after that. So it's really that, how do you actually start looking at projects to also address, all of the environmental characteristics that you have, but at the same time recognize that they work within a kind of political economy that we will also have to consider. And, by turning a kind of blind eye to that, it doesn't make the project possible. We've seen what's happened with the Mumbai Coastal Road already. So what we were going back in some sense to do for this particular project was look back in Mumbai's history to see where, of course, sorry, before I kind of move on, I have to add that this was the project we won was with a huge consortium. It was Ravi Punde Design Cell, Ratan Bharti Boy, and us as the architects. We had environmentalists on board, we had water specialists on board. So it was really a kind of robust team that actually took on the project. And so the first kind of thing that I think Ravi did was to also look back into the history of Mumbai's kind of evolution and how Mumbai, before the reclamation, you could actually go from the east coast of Bombay to the west coast of Bombay through waterways that went east-west. And over time, all of those waterways were blocked, but we were kind of hoping that at some point that would again become a channel for people's kind of mode of movement through the city. This, of course, is the site again, like I mentioned. This is the current section of the site. The carrying capacity of the river is constrained by the edge of which is on the side. This movement is a retaining wall to keep off the water and to then look at doing this kind of SRA format development just behind. What we were proposing instead was to look at that entire parcel of land as something that would allow itself to flood whenever the waters rose. We looked at this being a kind of temporal field which was open to modulations of weather, of water. I mean, it's not unusual because we'll also live in a country where the Kumbh Mela actually happens exactly in a situation like this, with in the banks of a river that completely transforms when the water levels are out sections are sympathetic to the performance of the Miti and its flow rather than being something that's separated. So this was really the kind of proposal at a larger scale, though this was not really a part of the, this was not a need for the competition, it was something that we built into our project. And this was also a comparison on of what, of how people had capped the soil back in the day when the 1970s, when the topsoil was capped, it was down to 500 mm. And when you look at today's best practices, this is really to make forests self-sustaining. So this is just a kind of comparison of that. We also examined the site for where we physically found a lot of tree fall happening. So we were marking these hotspots that indicated that there was some issue with the subsoil condition, and then developed a series of transects across our site talking about various conditions and various programs that would fit into the forest. We also created various kind of demonstration infrastructure to also indicate to visitors the kind of subsoil condition that there is and the kind of improvement over time. I'm not going to get into too many details of the project, but it's literally kind of looking at also creating a kind of edge that is communicating the extent of the park, because currently when you drive by it, this is what you actually see. And we were looking at signage, we were looking at the interface where there are bus stops, actually also do little seats that one could sit on while waiting for a bus as a part of the boundary wall. Do little kind of look-ins where you can climb up, get a different view of the park, and also bicycle stands, because we actually had this entire bridge that we were designing. I'm not going to show the bridge here currently, but what I'm going to show you is the kind of architecture that we built. This is what you actually see here is the ramp that leads you to the bridge. Under that ramp is the admin area and the cafe. We also portion part of our site to be completely free playground with public toilets located on it, because currently from one of the edges of the park, there were a lot of people coming in for open defecation along the river. So what we were trying to do is also look at how we could use this opportunity of the MNP to create public facilities and a public park for the residents of that area. And we try to keep these kind of these interventions being again very light, and also so that you can actually look to them to the forest behind. What you see on the left is the kind of arrival block where we took water from the Mithi River, polluted water from the Mithi River, ran it through remediation ponds, brought it in front to cleanse completely, to show the capacity of what a sensitive architectural and landscape together can do for a project. So what you see in front on the left is the kind of welcome center where you buy a ticket. What you see here is the library, event hall, and little amphitheater where big groups can be briefed before going into the jungle. And what you see here on the right is the ramp that takes you to the bridge, taking you to BKC from the outside. Within the welcome center, what we did was we cut into the ground and made steps that take you under to actually show you that the park actually sits on this kind of rubbish heap from the old landfill that was dumped here in the 90s, that was scrapped in the 1970s. And that's really a kind of overview of the project. It basically, this is the kind of Dharavi Road. What you actually get here is from the Dharavi Road directly. You can see the ramp that's taking you to the pedestrian cycling bridge to BKC. That is the welcome center. That's the amphitheater, and that's really a kind of we've expanded a butterfly park and other kind of landscape conditions. But that's basically the project. And I'm going to end with my favorite, one of my favorite essays actually, and definitely one of my favorite thinkers and writers, A.K. Ramanujan, who did this essay called "Is There an Indian Way of Thinking?", where he spoke about the fact that even if you just kind of re-emphasize each word in that sentence separately, you change the meaning of that sentence completely. So when you say "Is there an Indian way of thinking?", you're asking was. When he asks "Is there an," also questioning how do you define the singularity that is India. And when asking about, is there an Indian way of thinking, he's also asking if it's about, or is it about actions, where even in a country like ours, where even truth, and more so now in this kind of post-truth era, where even truth is subjective. And A.K. Ramanujan himself talks about this kind of subjectivity of truth by giving the example of the 300 versions of Ramayanas that exist all the way across from India to other parts of South Asia. And I think for me, the kind of real, in some sense, direction in this was to figure out a model of practice that would address the diversity that we find ourselves enmeshed in when we actually work in these varying contexts of the country. I think I'm going to stop here now. It's been about an hour. So I'm done now. So with the discussion with the Girish sir.
Oh, Samit, wonderful presentation. Oh my, what are drawings? I feel so as and I'm loving it, those drawings. As originally when we started doing miniature drawing in Doshi's office, I did the first drawing for the Sangat. And I went into memory lane, looking at drawing, but fabulous drawings, absolute lovable, and really congratulations for those drawings.
Thank you, sir. Actually, in the beginning, I mentioned that I had another presentation where I looked at a draw and what kind of influence that drawing actually has on space creation, where I actually show some of Doshi sir's drawings and how one is going to learn from that as well. So.
Yes. No, I was so surprised that even the empty site also, you did the drawing same way, for first visit to site, you do the same
Yeah,
drawing.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
so nice actually. Uh,
So,
so we have heard that you are a Bandra boy. Do you have any childhood memories? And of course, you talked about Kashmir and Rainawari. Uh,
right.
so Bandra, which by itself is a small city within Mumbai. So any childhood memories, anything you can speak
Yeah,
about?
lots. I mean, in the sense, I think there was a point when after maybe about a month and a half post the lockdown, I was just looking out of my window, and I was looking. I have a few trees there, and it was sunny at that point, and I remember something about the quality of light that one saw. That immediately took me back to when I was a child, and as friends we used to play cricket in the building, and then we would sit under the trees to take a break to drink water. It was exactly that light, and it was I got so carried away by that I called some of my old friends who had not talked for 25 years since we played cricket together. Just because of the fact that struck me. Yeah. So, well, Bandra used to be. I mean, it still is in many ways, but it used to be a village. And I went to school in Bandra. I used to. There were certain lanes that one would walk by where you had in the monsoons you had water, and there was a particular kind of plant that grew where you actually took out, if you took out a little part of that plant, a little seed, and you put it in the water, it would pop. And we would do that many times. So I mean, there are lots of memories. Yeah, but that the fact that I never, actually as a person, or actually not as a person, but as an architect, I'm really more interested in the idea of how a problem and the qualitative aspects of of architecture, the sense of light, the way the light hits the wall, and what Khan said, what Doshi sir say. I'm not really big on that. I mean, it's great. I mean, of course, you should be able to do that. But for me, the ability of architecture to solve a problem is far greater. But there was something during that lockdown and that looking out of my window, seeing that quality of light, it completely changed my kind of perception of what that quality of light can do to your experience and memory. But yeah, I think I don't know whether I've answered your question or I've just gone on a
Yes,
little
yes.
ramble.
No, no.
But yeah,
Of course, and you have a very beautiful railway station too. To Bandra.
yeah. We
In the
do.
past, I have visited your office and I have found, of course, you were not there, you were not well, you had injury in your hand, but your office was very generous and I had a very good memories of that. And I found that your studio is a vibrant space with a lots of model and folding
Yeah.
amphitheater, which your staff was very keen to show me, and I
Right.
was supposed to talk there. And recently, I've seen a miniature drawing of your office, which you showed today.
Yeah.
I'm curious to
Yeah.
know how your studio function. Please tell us something about it.
No, so that's actually a very good question because I'm also not of the school that believes of the architect as the kind of author creator. We architect solution when we build our projects. There are other people who are building it for us. We are working with consultants, so we're always working in a team. And even within the studio, for me personally, I feel the best work that we do is when we are able to kind of talk to each other. If even a trainee has an idea, and if it is an idea that is discussed, and if we feel that it has merit, it goes forward. So we're always sitting together to discuss a project. My idea has no distance if it doesn't stand to critical to a critique by anybody else. So as a group, what we try and do is always discuss ideas. So I'm not making a final sketch and somebody's drafting. In fact, many times what happens is we are working on models directly. So we're changing something here and we're adding something there and so on and so forth. And it's really a kind of incremental process. So the lockdown for me has also meant that I'm separated from making models, and it's I mean that's the thing that have missed the most during the lockdown. But But yeah, I think for me, the idea of the studio is more the idea of a lab where we are constantly kind of looking for things. I would love to actually, be able to have an idea, wake up in the morning, draw the project, and have somebody, kind of sketch the project, have somebody draw it, and then somebody build it. But I'm just so unsure of everything that that I do, that I need a certain amount of a process rigor to make sure that we are at the at the right place at the in the project. And I think I think I'm happier that way in some sense, because what it allows me to do is it allows me to be wrong. Because once that fear of being wrong is taken away, then you're able to kind of break new ground. Because if you're constantly living in the fear कि अच्छा ये चलेगा कि नहीं और ये खड़ा होगा कि नहीं, that becomes a kind of a limiting factor. So when your other people are there with you and you kind of propose something, are afraid because you know that there is somebody who will pick up and say that, no, okay, this won't work, but we could try it like this. So we are constantly kind of working together as in some sense singularly, but as multiple heads within that singularity. And I don't know, maybe I should also think about this sometimes, that do the nature of the projects that we create change depending on who are the people who are working with us at that particular point of time. With a group that I worked on, maybe a project we did a way. Today, are we doing a project in a way that's different from that? I mean, of course, you'll have to factor the fact that you also going to grow, but really, the way that we actually work is this constant kind of consultative process. In fact, it's a process that also has allowed us, not just within the studio, but also beyond, to kind of collaborate with people like Hunarshala, with Herbs, with Start, with Abin, with Biju, projects together. So it's really it's a process that is open-ended enough to take in whatever influences that there are, to make sure that what you get at the end of the project is the most appropriate thing for the project itself. I mean, in some sense, it's also about the kind of the cliche of how India, in some sense, is able to take in a lot of influences and still come out as something that's unique. But yeah, again, I don't know. I went into a little spiral with that explanation.
This is what I was expecting, and you talked about Rohan, Riaz, Abin, Biju, Arvind sir, Neera madam.
Yeah.
So it's like, almost like Hunarshala. So almost we are connecting the whole of India. And the way you spoke, it was so fast. Yeah. All this is in you all the time, So it is unbelievable. And I here wanted to narrate, even in Doshi's office, when we used to do many alternatives, each architect or each trainee will have his own take, that this is the best design what Doshi has done, and eventually nothing will happen, but the whole process of doing it, and each model will be done, but eventually nothing will happen. So many a time the drawings which are not used, now luckily Doshi has a library of all those drawings, so someday we can see it, so I think that is the best part of studio, like yours is not a corporate office, it's a studio. So yeah, and also I wanted to ask you how you conceptualize the study of housing and eventually the book in the name of housing.
So, sir, I mean, that was actually, I've always, in some sense, been interested in research. So that is something that goes without saying. And kind of work that we do to kind of figure out what a project can be, already kind of, in some sense, has that. But it started off with a developer who actually came to us saying that he wanted to do an affordable housing project in Karjat. And I didn't show that project today, but what we were basically then starting to do is look for background research on what was done in the past in terms of affordable housing and what is literature available on it. Of course, there are fantastic books by Neera, for instance, who did this beautiful kind of book on worker housing and the mill housing, Neera and Arvind. And while there were lots of narratives that existed, and even in film, I mean, movies like Katha, which were so evocative of that kind of the culture, the kind of social fabric that housing created. There was also narrative. It wasn't enough that available on the tectonic, on what was the architecture that was prevalent in that kind of housing. So it really just started off as a very innocent kind of foray into into parts of Bombay to go and see how people lived in small spaces. It really started off like that. And it was just one thing after the other. We kept finding projects that were incredible, and also going back to the people and how people are extremely important to what we do. It was Saloni, who used to work with us and is now living in Copenhagen. She was around, and she really got excited by what she saw. And she kind of went out. Marsha did that, Diane did that, and it was because of the excitement that these guys had, in some sense, that we were able to kind of build on that energy to find these fantastic projects, then to kind of draw them up as you would draw. Draw them up dispassionately, in some sense, while we had passion to make the drawing, but we separated the narratives from the drawing to just purely examine the what in terms of circulation, social space, FSI, FAR, what were they kind of consuming, to really just look at it through a nuts and bolts lens and not through the lens of narrative. And that basically found that it became a project by itself. Then UDRI published it about 2 months ago, about a month ago. The national edition of that book was released, published. This has become a textbook in the Netherlands, at Delft, in South Africa. It's got in Israel. It's basically found an audience that I'm quite frankly surprised by. I didn't think that anybody would find resonance in issues of housing that we had historically had in Mumbai. But it's been surprising and hugely educative. Now then, kind of Meta Next, which in some sense deals with the kind of frameworks that allow for housing to be built in a particular way, which is on building code and development plans. Again, long winded explanation. But
yeah, actually, you explained about your two temples, especially the Balaji. But still, you have anything more, or how that project came to you? And generally, they go to somewhere in Ayodhya.
Yeah, so
Ayodhya to build temple, they don't come to Bandra Boy.
That's no chance that Bandra Boy is going to get a temple. But no, I think it was basically the fact that that Shiv temple was something that they saw, and JSW liked, and then I think it really becomes, once the project is there, it really is up to us as to how many layers we can add to what is a simple religious space. And the idea of the water kind of remediation, groundwater recharge, all that in some sense was critical. In fact, the site of the temple was somewhere else when we actually started off the project, which we then moved, which then had to be moved to the site. And then we saw the water, and then actually it automatically became a means to generate or to rejuvenate an idea that we had actually worked almost 6 years ago. So yeah, it was, and again, like I'm saying that I think my interest in reduction also kind of ties in with this idea, or with this the idea of building in remote areas like this, where once you start seeing things, it also the way that the project is kind of put together. And sometimes that simplification also means to go back or tap into local systems of construction, which was important. But again, I have to say it's also about patronage, to that extent that that the JSW Cement Group, Anushri and Parth, kind of do projects like this. Many an issue, but of course we were also working with priests from the Balaji temple who were kind of commenting on the project. So there were lots of changes that we had to do because of that. So it's a negotiation every time. So but you also know, sir, that my first temple was 2010, second temple in 2020. I have 10 years for the next temple. So
we'll wait for 2030. Somehow, the people like to go on terraces of your building. Even in Balaji temple, I seen few women sitting on the steps, of the temple,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
also that
yeah,
school you have done in Maharashtra, where
yeah,
everybody loves
yeah,
to. I
yeah.
remember
Climb.
sending you one film.
Yeah, you send me a video.
Yes, video where kids are playing on
Correct,
that. So what is
correct,
that? I
correct,
mean,
correct.
so
So I think one is, of course, the kind of connection to landscape. I really, for me, trying to kind of look at the building as a monument is something that is counterintuitive. And and also, I think the age of monuments is done. Even though we are building many tall statues and new government projects, but I think the age of the monument is over, and what we need to figure is what lies beyond the narrative of that kind of evidence of kind of presence of a superior in our case state power, but to really look at an architecture that is accessible both visually and physically. Also for me, in some sense, making architecture accessible in like a landscape is also subverting some of the trappings that you would typically associate with with school buildings. Like as a kid, when I used to I went to St. Andrew's School again in Bandra. It's a big imposing building, and it's massive, and I was something that was always unnerving. When I can think about it, I never enjoyed my school as much, but the library of that school building was in a small tiny attic, in the roof. It was an old building. It had a sloping roof, Bangalore tiles, and all wooden boarding. They had an attic library where you had a spiral staircase to go up, and the scale was really beautiful. And it was, just the fact that I felt like I was in a space that was maybe comfortable as a child, that I took to reading. And even today, I mean, it's something that I still am a kind of voracious reader. But I think it's that the idea of making space accessible, physically, is something that's very important. Whether it's through kind of dropping the ceiling height, or whether it's through kind of blending the project into the landscape. But it's really about, in some sense, subverting the idea of the architecture as something that needs to stand out. Though some of these buildings do, but it's from a process of reduction, not as a process of making a monument.
So next question is idea behind the formation of Bandra Collective, and from where you get all this energy. It seems that you don't sleep. Something is written on backside of you. So
it's a book that says where architects sleep.
So I believe that you don't sleep, because I don't know from where all this energy comes, from making of drawings. And so the question is about Bandra Collective and
yeah, I mean, the Bandra Collective was really something that came about because I was kind of trying to do whatever a little I could here in Bandra, in a place that I grew up. You saw everything was changing, not necessarily for the better, and we were constantly complaining about it. We were trying to do whatever we could within our own neighborhoods. When my store in that village, we were doing a little bit. And there are other people like the bus ride boys who were doing other things in their neighborhood. So finally, I actually kind of caught up with one of them and said that, listen, we are all kind of working individually, and it's a huge kind of imposition on our resources. It's some of us are not as good as doing some things as the other person is. So maybe it's better we get together and try and do stuff as a group, which would also allow us to distribute some of the financial kind of strain of doing something like this, between the six of us. And it's just as simple as that. And what my kind of what I wanted to actually kind of do was go and catch people who I could, call up in the middle of the night and tell them that, boss, we have to go look at this thing. And somebody I could literally drag out of bed and say, chal, let's go get stuff done. So, that's the basic kind of impetus that came out of, how we actually structured it. And we basically wanted to be, we also had enough connections between the six of us, had enough connections with local resident groups. Some of us knew people in the BMC. So we were able to then start developing a kind of network of let's say, movement within these corridors that create public spaces or public projects in Bandra and in the city maybe. So that's how it started off. Very innocently.
So what is your
And the
magic?
energy, I sleep at 10 o'clock. I sleep at 10 o'clock, wake up at 4 o'clock. That's it. So I get my 6 hours, 7 hours of sleep. So
yeah, I wanted to ask you what is your magic potion? Like asterisks.
I
Anyway.
can't stay awake at night.
It seems you have a young architect friend called Balkrishna Doshi.
When he called me friend, I thought I should now shut practice and enjoy the adulation. So, it's a great time. He's just incredible. He's just incredible. Unbelievable. Yeah.
We are very happy, that he talks about you.
Sorry, speaks about you as well, not just me.
No, that's okay. But public platform, it means a lot,
Yeah, it does. It's a huge one.
Okay, so now I will ask Tanay to take questions from
sure.
Audience. Probably Jayant Murray is also there.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was really an interesting presentation, and the discussion or the dialogue that happened between you and Girish sir was really interesting, reliving the moments. And I'm sure you, the Bandra memories that you relived through the dialogue.
Sorry, I have to add. Just one thing I want to add.
Sure.
I told Jayant this, who Girish just mentioned, that when one of a big kind of influence me, or one of the things that I was really kind of impressioned by, it was where, back when I just graduated from academy, and I was a TA for my professor Rajiv Sathe, who of course is a good friend of Girish sir as well, and Khalil Sheikh. We had actually come to Pune with some students to see some of Girish sir's work, and I still remember the office that I had gone to. I still remember the houses that I've seen. It was an incredible experience. I have not forgotten it to date. It was one of those experiences that I've learned incredible amounts from. So, sir, that I want to tell you that. So I should tell it to you now, because I've forgotten to tell it to you earlier. That it was one of my great learning experiences on going to actual projects. And to your office as well. I remember that double seating that you had done of people staying one on top of the other, overlapping the double decker section. It was fantastic.
Yes, I remember. Yes. Thank you so much.
Oh, so that's.
Well, having mentioned about Jayant Mule sir, we have so many questions from him for you. So I'll start with his first question, rather. It is from Jayant Mule sir. There is a belief that the future is in collaboration and trying to connect people outside our industry. In our Indian context, what do you think can be successful business model for the architectural practice?
Jayant, once I find that out, I will let you know, because kind of financial success, I'm a kind of long way off from that. But yeah, no, I have no idea, man. I really have no idea. But I would like to. I know that there might be some young students who are listening in on this, but I don't have like a like an optimistic answer to how do you become financially successful. My father used to say, he still does, not now anymore, but he used to say that you find the work that you want to do the work well, money will follow. But I often ask him, where is that money? It hasn't followed me so far. But yeah, I really don't know, Jayant, man. This is something you should tell me, being successful.
Yeah. Am I audible to you, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So again, next question from Jayant Mule sir itself. So it is
he's monopolizing the questions.
Yeah, he has got so many questions for you. I'm going to ask all the questions that he has asked. So, what is your say on globalized approach to architecture? What advice would you give to young budding architects?
So that binary of global and local, I think, is something that we should now question, because really we're not living in a time where those distinctions are that strong. We are now being able to, like I've said, through the Maya Sumaya project as well, the library project, that we are now being able to learn from what used to be considered global, but make the local richer. But we are being able to look at these kind of networks of knowledge to enrich the local. So that debate about uh, what is regional, it should no longer be about a certain image of what we've perceived a certain regional architecture to be, but really it should be about the values that we are kind of building with. How do you make the building cooler in summers? How do you consume less material? How do you improve the construction technique of what people have traditionally been doing, and how do the craftsmen or the labor who actually work on that now have a new skill that they can use to improve their own kind of livelihood possibilities as well. So those are kind of questions, I think, that are important. And this kind of binary and of between global and local is no longer, I feel, relevant.
Right. Well, in connection to that, with the practice or the advice to the young architects, I have a question from Yashoda Joshi, ma'am. So the question is, thank you so much for this presentation. Urban projects of scale like National War Museum and Mahim Nature Park require a strong political will and backing. How do you negotiate between this political will and core idea of your design without compromising with the truth of your design?
Yeah, I think this is a question that you'll have to ask Bimal, because I'm not building the National War Museum anymore. I completely agree with what Yashoda said, that as architects, we are not cognizant of the fact that there is a kind of political economy to any project that we build, whether it is related to class, whether it's related to caste, whether it's related to the kind of performance of the project, and how a local cooperator might need their project to get elected again. Once we are able to, and architecture is also not asking these questions, quite frankly, and we are really kind of to now, if we need to be relevant as a profession, if we need to be relevant as people who are doing or who are trying to make society better through their work, architecture will have to start asking or start seeking answers. Well, not even seeking answers, at least start asking these questions. So right now, all of that is beyond the debate that we actually go through within our colleges and our institutes. But I think once we are able to do that at the level of the school, and acknowledge the fact that all of these factors are going to be an important part of our kind of the environments that we produce. I think only then will we be able to do what Yashoda is talking about, that is address this issue of political will. Because I mean, the National War Museum that we won was approved by the Prime Minister himself, but obviously there is a kind of political bureaucratic machinery that operates within what do you say, circles and circles of some kind. And I can't get into details here, but yeah, so it's if you're it's good to be idealistic, but it's also not good to be naive. And yeah, and Yashoda's also, of course, I know her, she's a friend. So I think this is like we're just having a party. I know so many people here. It's maybe you should just get together on a separate Zoom call to ask these questions.
Well, my next question is from architect Virendra Vaklu.
Hey, this is all like this is all our group here. I mean, this is, you should just get onto a separate call. But no, yeah, of course, Viren is a very.
I'm still holding back Jayan sir's questions. I have a few more to ask.
I'm going to Jayan's farm over some weekend, and he can ask me all those questions. But no, yeah, Viren, of course, is a good friend. Sure, whatever. What is his question?
So
he probably already has an answer. Right? He's much older and wiser than me. He already has an answer for this.
Probably when he is there for the talk, you can ask him questions like that.
No, of course. I mean, I ask him without being on a talk. Also, I can pick up phone and call him 100%. But anyway, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So he says that brilliant work, Samir. I am seeing for the first time your recent works and the incredible volume that you have accomplished. There seems to be a noticeable difference in the craftsmanship between the projects, that is between the temple and the apartments located next to Charles Korea Goa project. Is this due to the team or an international architectural decision, intentional architectural decision, or determined by cost?
So it's a developer project. Using is faster for the building because of cost paradigms. But I mean, just to kind of encapsulate an answer for Viren's question, it's determined by cost. But you know, the thing also, I think, yeah, in some sense, you know, answering Viren's question takes me back to also Girish sir's question about you know, the energy. It's not so much the energy, really, more the kind of schizophrenia work that or the kinds of work that we do. And I really think that what has happened is the production of an arch or what we see as architect developers has been kind of divorced in some sense from the agency of design. You know, you can either, you know, work do design projects, or you can do you know, developer work, and there doesn't seem to be a kind of overlap. I think that is also a condition that has been kind of pushed through by you know, some precedents of the way that practices have occurred in the past. And I, for one, I'm interested in being able to challenge that kind of separation as well. And if it means working for a developer and doing I would still take that on, because I have a chance to maybe not address material intelligence, but to address a kind of change in a project typology, which would push the typology forward, if not the material. So, so differences, however small, add up eventually, and I hope they add up eventually. But we'll see. You know, Viren's he's done some incredible work, and I have to figure out how to get to his things that we are doing. But yeah, again, hugely inspirational work. Yeah, I mean, it's I can't. I mean, I'm assuming I can't see. I mean, there's no way we can get him on video. But yeah, but I'd probably come back and ask him some tough questions about all the secrets of his formula for form finish concrete and stuff. I'm joking. He's already kind of given those to me.
Sure. Being you know, having lived for a long period of time in Bandra and Mumbai, this is a question that I would want to ask you. Is that so? I am also basically from suburbs of Mumbai. So the experience that I have faced, and I would like to ask, this current situation that Mumbai is facing, 2005. You talked about it when you talked about Maharashtra National Park project. And then recently we had this huge storm that happened, and it struck quite badly what Mumbai faced. So what do you think towards, and with, of course, all the change in you know, public movement patterns that are happening these days, what do you think Mumbai could in future would want to reimagine the city could be, something like, in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't know, quite frankly. You know, it's just I would like to be prophetic and say that, you know, this is what it should be, but I quite frankly have no idea. I don't. I mean, there are so many things that are broken about our city. You know, the pandemic, for one, just brought them out into the open. You know, whether it is the way that we look at the labor that we actually have in our city, the migrants who had to go back home, the way that we look after where our maids or our drivers live. Well, I'm saying we, but it's really a kind of collective responsibility. But I don't know. I don't know what to fix, quite frankly. There's just so much. If there is one thing that I would hope for, it would be greater equity. I think that's basically it. That this kind of disparity that we sometimes very proudly talk about, the adjacency of a slum with a luxury high-rise. Sure, that's a kind of good talking point, but realities are kind of far divorced from that, and we've just seen this. I mean, it's So yeah, greater equity.
Okay. So we have one question from Dharmesh Jadeja, sir.
This is again a friend.
I told you I have too many people. So he basically he says, as always, brilliant Sameep and team. I am surprised how do you negotiate so many streams simultaneously in such a wonderful practice and manifesting so much. What is the common creative thread you have experienced in scales from a simple home to large scale projects, institutions, and from urban public realm to research in housing in a city like Mumbai, where space is so skewed?
Yeah, it's basically what I told. I think I probably didn't kind of stress on it enough. It's just that idea of doubt. Whether what you're saying, what you're doing, is the right decision. Whether it is whether it is appropriate. Whether it is something that you kind of built up in your own mind and it need not be the right approach. It is that factor of doubt that prompts more search, right? And for me, I think the one common thing in our practice and is the fact that we don't say we know, because that's what we also don't say we know because we don't know, but we don't say we know, but we are constantly looking to find out. And I think that's really the only kind of commonality between all of the projects, that we are constantly looking to see where we can go from here, or from where we are at, what more can we do with less. So I think that's really, if there's one thing that there is, this kind of search of how to do more with less. Yeah. And Dharmesh is also a friend. Dharmesh, I have to come to Auroville. Hopefully, at one point, this lockdown is going to end, and I'm going to find my way down there and see all that wonderful stuff that you do here. But yeah, another Zoom call for that for now.
Sure. So now I have consecutive questions from Jayant sir for you. So, well, yeah. Yeah, so first the question from Jayant sir is, could you enlighten us on your experience at SKYAC, which is supposedly a radical thinking institute?
I hated
Sorry?
I hated it when I was there, because this is back in 1999. In fact, I didn't like it at all. And I remember that during Thanksgiving break, I think it was also the city. I was in LA. This is pre-internet, so all you know of LA is Hollywood, and also the Doors song, that Roadhouse Blues, live from Los Angeles, the Doors. So it was all that kind of imagery of LA that I had in my head. And of course, the reality is completely different. It's a car city. It's got beautiful weather, of course. But I was completely out of place. And I then went to New York for a Thanksgiving break or something like that. And I remember landing in New York. I felt like I was home. I mean, it was the closest that I felt that it was a fabric that I understood. I could walk around. You could interact with people. But of course, it's a personal thing. I mean, it's not, maybe now today when I go back to LA, I might like LA better than I like New York, but no, I don't think so. But yeah, still, it's. I think it was SKYAC was defined, one, by the fact that I was in a city I didn't like. Second was the fact that it was extremely formal. I was hoping that I would learn. I mean, I'd gone for a master's program, so I was hoping to learn some new ways or learning more than I'd learned in my college years. But what I felt I was getting was just compositional variation, not another way of thinking, which was also kind of disappointing at that point. And also, I think SKYAC at that point was in a middle space. It had gone from the real kind of hands-on school that was set up by Ray Cappy, Thom Mayne, Michael Rotondi, to a kind of slightly more kind of intellectual, software-driven school by Michael Speaks and by Neil Denari. So yeah, it was in a middle space. So maybe it wasn't the best time to be there as well. So
okay. Well, the next question from him is what which was the pivotal
I think
phase?
no, listen. Jayant knows that I like having a conversation more than giving a lecture, which is why he's asked all these questions. So, so I think you can discount some of these if you think that there are other people also there.
No, so what I'll do is basically, so there are only a couple of questions that are
Okay,
there.
that's fine.
So let's. So I'll just quickly ask you the questions. So
Sure.
the one question that he is asking is, which was the pivotal phase in your career?
Formally, I think seeing the work of Richard Serra. I remember going to well, not just Richard Serra. Actually, there are three buildings that four buildings actually that I think were transformative moments in my life. One was the first time that I saw the Taj Mahal, which was in third year architecture. I'd gone there as a kid, but I never remembered it. The second was before architecture actually. So I got the chronology wrong. So before when I joined architecture, I was always interested in architecture, but I made a family holiday to Mandu. And my cousin sisters, my cousin brother, they were thoroughly bored. They were tearing their hair out. In fact, it was coincidentally, it was the trip during that time. It was where L.K. Advani was arrested for his Rath Yatra. And they had shut down Madhya Pradesh. So there was a curfew and all of that. So we were stuck in Mandu, which I absolutely loved. It was, I don't know. I mean, it was when I think back, I can of course rationalize it. Spatial experience was beautiful, kind of sculpture. I was completely taken up by that. The second was the Taj Mahal, like I mentioned. I remember, seeing pictures of Taj Mahal. I was a voracious reader. I read a lot about it, and I said, how good can this be? It's not. What is it going to be when I walk in? But I remember walking in through that main small little gateway, and you come in, and the Taj Mahal feels right up at you. It's like it occupies the kind of three-dimensional space around you, and you're kind of completely engulfed in it. The third such experience was, I'm going to club it with two buildings by Louis Kahn. One is the Salk Institute. Very similar experience to the Taj, where the water is really, that kind of conversation between the water is fantastic, and the sky is fantastic. And his Exeter Library, again, phenomenal building. You have to see it to believe how fantastic the building is. And lastly, seeing a retrospective of Richard Serra's talked ellipses. Again, extremely simple. It's just curved steel plates, right? But the experience of those curved steel plates in any space was phenomenal. And after that, I've been a Richard Serra junkie. Whenever there's a kind of exhibition by him, I try and kind of get to that point and see the work. But those talked ellipses were completely transformative.
Yeah.
I mean, doing more with less, basically. Yeah, incredible.
Sure. Well, the last question for today that Jayant sir has asked, and even I would want to add a little bit to it. So he's asking that your take on today's young architecture graduates and your advice to them. But I have a further addition to it: young architecture graduates as well as who are willing to join architecture from the perspective that the entire reforms are happening in architecture and practice altogether.
Right. Well, yeah, there are 2-3 things that I think are always kind of good to have. One is, I said this earlier as well, but don't lose your idealism too soon. One is, you always hear people saying that, but hey, this is what they teach you in college, but what happens outside in practice could be different. So don't lose your idealism early. Hold on to it as much as you can. But at the same time, don't be naive. Architecture doesn't kind of operate in a vacuum, right? It's not your desire to create a building doesn't create the building. There are so many other factors that kind of influence it that you have to be cognizant of that and be able to negotiate that. So that was the second thing. The third thing I would say is be extremely critical of everything you do. I mean, your own ideas especially. Be the most critical about your own ideas. And the last thing that I would say is, doubt, being unsure is really the kind of genesis of any project. And your entire design process is really about alleviating that doubt, about finding out what the project needs to be. If you know already, if I sit in a room, make a sketch and say that this is what the project is, that really the design process has no meaning. And the design process is allowing you to do exactly that, to find out what a project wants to be, what it needs to be, and what it should be, but doubt that as well. But yeah, that's basically it.
So yeah, it was a great session. I think Girish sir, you want to add something to it? Yeah, sure. I'll give over to Girish sir.
I will agree with you about Richard Serra, because I was very lucky to see his sculpture in Bilbao, in Guggenheim Museum. No? It was an unbelievable experience going through those curves of steel. Second, I wanted to say that you are so lucky to get a name like Kasu Zama or Kasu Jira. Here we do some Jaishri housing or something, But anyway, it's nice. And third thing I wanted to say that I will request Jayant Mure to actually finance your building, War Museum in Pune, find a land for it and build it exactly the way it is. We'll find the trees also at the exact.
We'll grow the trees.
So that is my request to Jayant sir. Anyway, I'm meeting him tomorrow, so I will take it further.
Jayant can definitely do it, I'm sure. Please convince him, Girish sir.
Yes, I will do that. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samit, for amazing presentation and the range of projects and the sensitivity that you talked about to the context and the materials was really something to learn for all of us. And the rare treat of looking at your unbuilt projects along with the ongoing and the built work. So that was really amazing. And I'm sure everybody has enjoyed to the core. I mean, just 2 hours was really amazing time that we all of us had. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And to all the attendees, thank you so much for being with us today. And let's continue with the another amazing session tomorrow at the same time. And I invite Samit also to join us tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It is Uday Andhare tomorrow.
Yeah, Uday Andhare.
Okay, great. Uday's, I'll stop by.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye.